So yeah, hello everyone and welcome to Mindset Masterclass. I'll give you a little bit of background about why it is that we'll be talking about this kind of thing, mindfulness, breathing, meditation. So I come from an addictions background, from a lived experience angle, as well as a kind of practice and research angle as well. So from lived experience, meditation, breathing, mindfulness has been a huge part of my own journey. And now we have a program here at the University of Birmingham, which is a recovery program, what's called a collegiate recovery program. It's the first of its kind in Europe where it's integrated into a university. And a lot of the stuff that you'll be hearing today is very much based around this kind of well-being and mental health angle of things. And Tilly is from Reset, who are an organisation that we work with in order to deliver part of our programme around mind seminars, breathing and some physical stuff as well. So I'll hand over to Tilly now, and she's going to give us a bit of an overview of what Reset do and then go into this with more detail. So I'll hand over to Tilly now.
How do I change
So it's that way to go forward, yeah.
So, hi everybody, I'm Tilly. I'm an assistant psychologist with the Reset Health Group. So, let's see if I can do this. Here we go. So today I'm going to be talking a bit about the mechanisms behind breathwork and meditation. Do I point here? Oh, I point this way. Okay, I'm going the wrong way. Okay, back to the start. So I'm an assistant psychologist and I work for a wellbeing company who utilises the mind-body connection. So we believe we have the intrinsic tools in order to kind of like harness our full potential and to become our best selves ultimately. In line with that, I'm also an Oxygen Advantage instructor, so I have the tools to be able to both experience and witness the power breathing function they can have on physical and mental health. So breathwork and meditation are both intrinsic tools we have in order to optimise our physical and mental health. So this is what we will be going through today. So firstly, a brief introduction into why we're talking about this, a bit about the stress system, how we can manage the stress system, and then we're going to actually complete some breathing exercises so we can actually feel the effect of how this feels, which is really important. And then we're going to think about how does breathwork and meditation work, and an opportunity for questions and reflections as well. Oh, this way. Why do I keep doing that? So, it's actually the perception of a threat that triggers what we call our stress system. So, our stress system is what we call our sympathetic nervous system, which is also what we call our fight, flight, or freeze mode, which a lot of you, I'm sure, will have heard of this. This is an amazing mechanism to have because when we are in a stressful or dangerous situation, it's really important that we have something that we can activate. So, for example, if we're crossing a road and we have a car coming towards us, it's really important we're able to step out of the way of that car. We don't want to have time to think rationally, to think clearly. We just want to get out of the way and out of that danger. The issue is, in modern society, a lot of us now are activating this stress system when we're not actually in stressful situations. So we're getting a work email, we're getting a social media notification, something like that is activating this same fight or flight response when we're not actually in any danger necessarily. So what's important to remember here is our perception that activates this stress system. So, for example, we all have different life experiences, different traumatic experiences, different cultural upbringings that influence the way we perceive the world around us and other people. So we can all go through the same event and we're all going to interpret that event in a completely different way. So, for example, if I'm someone who's grown up with not very secure attachment with others, perhaps, I haven't had many good friendships growing up. If I'm in this situation and I walk past someone in the street and they don't look at me, they don't notice me, I might notice my perception to be quite negative. They don't like me, they've never liked me, I never liked them anyway, and I might feel quite hurt, anxious, and I might react by ignoring future messages or something like that. If I had quite a positive self-perception, I've had quite secure attachments when I was growing up, I'm going to perceive this event in an entirely different way. I might go, they must have had their music in, they looked quite stressed, are they okay? And that might be my reaction. I might actually reach out to them. So we will go on to how this influences breath work a little bit later. But what's important to remember right now is it's our perception that actually influences this stress system. And we have a lot of tools inside of us that can control this perception and the way we perceive stressful events around us. So once the stress system is triggered, your whole body actually changes the way of functioning in so many different senses. These are, to name a few, so we release stress hormones, our heart rate might increase and our blood flow. The blood flow we find direct into our arms and legs, and we might find fluctuations in our blood sugar, craving fattier, sugarier foods and things like this in order to get more energy, in order to fuel that fight or flight system. So our perception alone, while this is a really great system to have, to reiterate, if we are in a dangerous situation, we don't want to be in this all the time. This is only for survival situations, but many of us nowadays are constantly in this stress mode and we're not even aware of it. So the good news of this is, great news, we actually have the intrinsic tools in order to deal with this better ultimately. So through breath work and meditation, we can actively change our perception, and not only that, we can step out of our stress system and avoid entering it in the first place. So they're really powerful intrinsic tools we have. Our mind and our body are entirely connected. So what we think is going to manifest in our body. So, for example, right now I'm public speaking. My heart is racing a little bit. I notice I am quite nervous, ultimately. This is a completely normal reaction, but those thoughts I'm having, that experience I'm having is manifesting in my body in some way. So our thoughts are really, really powerful, and they are going to impact the way we think, react, and things like this. So breathwork and meditation are really powerful tools in order to alter our perception and to manage our stress system and our thoughts and feelings better. It's going in slow-mo. Oh, that's the one I want, the breath per minute test. So our breath can be a really good indicator of how stressed we're feeling ultimately. So we're all going to take a minute to complete a breath per minute test. So I'm just going to get my notes for a second. So we're going to measure how many breaths we take per minute. So I would invite everyone to place one hand on your chest and one on your stomach. And I want you to breathe completely normally. Try not to alter your breath in any way. And I'm going to time you for 1 minute. You're going to count how many breaths you take per minute. And one breath is 1 breath in, 1 breath out. So when I say go, we're all going to count how many breaths we have per minute. So go. Okay, and stop. So we're all going to take a minute just to kind of reflect on how that felt for you. What did you notice about your breath? Did you notice you were breathing quite fast? Were you breathing quite slowly? So really take a minute to think about how you were breathing. Did you notice your hand on your upper chest was moving more than your hand on your stomach? Really take a moment to reflect. And how many breaths did you take per minute is the kind of ultimate question of why we do that test. So I'm going to do a quick show of hands. How many people had over 20 breaths per minute? No one? About 20. About 20. About 20, few about 20s in there. What about between 10 and 20? Few, yeah, so most people between 10 and 20. And was there anyone below 10? Fantastic, okay, very good. So the optimum, what we should be aiming for in an ideal world is actually 6 breaths per minute. So that's how slowly and deeply and regulated we should be breathing. If we're breathing, above 15 breaths per minute, it's a really good indicator that we're actually in this stress system, and our heart rate and our respiratory rate is at an incredible speed, which is going to induce further feelings of kind of stress and anxiety. And we will talk about that more a little bit later. So how do we breathe when we are stressed? Thank you. So a little bit behind the breath work and why breath work kind of works and how it matters and how it's a good indicator ultimately. So the way we breathe has a massive impact on our well-being in many different ways. So when we're stressed, we might notice we're breathing quite shallow, quite fast-paced. We might be panicking, over-breathing, so taking way too many breaths per minute. We might be breathing more from the upper chest and through our mouth instead of through our nose. So they're quite shallow breaths and we don't feel like we're getting them deep into our lungs, as well as increased heart rate and muscle tension. So we're going to think about why this is. Why is it that our heart rate and our respiratory rate increases so much when we're stressed? So this is because when we're in our stress system or our flight or fight mode, once again, it's a really amazing mechanism in this sense, but it's going to redirect blood to areas in the body where it needs to go. So it's going to redirect blood to our arms and to our legs, places where we might need to fight or flight, basically. This is where the mechanism comes in and that stress system. So this directs blood away from rational area, thinking parts of the brain, away from our digestive system, away from our immune system, really important mechanisms that we need to function well, but obviously it's not an immediate threat, so therefore we need to send our blood to that immediate threat. The other mechanism at play here is when the body increases the heart rate and respiration rate, this is to get energy and oxygen to go to those areas of the body as a rapid fuel response to that danger, to give us the energy and fight we need to function ultimately. So if we don't use this extra oxygen by fighting or flighting, because obviously we're not actually in a stressful situation, we're not actually in danger, what we find if we've got excess oxygen in our body, and our oxygen and our CO2 are going to go out of line basically, and we're not going to use this extra oxygen, this imbalance actually causes symptoms of anxiety because there's way too much oxygen in the blood. So there's loads of different mechanisms going on here about how our stress system and our breath work are so in sync. More than that as well, there's such a cyclical nature here, guys. Once we're in this stress system, once we're breathing in this way and we've evoked this stress system, we're going to think from more areas of our brain, more of our fearful areas of our brain, which is going to perceive more threat, more fear, breathing faster, and it just keeps us in this cycle of being in our stress system, breathing faster. You're constantly in this cycle of feeling stuck, basically. When we're thinking about our earlier example about how this perception alters our reactions and the way we perceive the world, we can see how important that is, because that's going to change the way we interact with each other, ourselves, and the world entirely. So relaxed breathing ultimately helps by slowing down our breathing and rebalancing the amount of this oxygen and carbon dioxide in our blood, basically. So slowing down our breath is a really key part to this, and then we're going to talk about the mechanisms behind that a little bit more after. So we're going to complete a breathing exercise today, because I think whilst it's important to talk about this, I think it's doubly as important to actually experience the effect it has on your body. There's so many different breathing techniques, guys, and obviously it's quite a limited amount of time we have today. Today we're going to be focusing on actually slowing down our breathing and how to activate what we call our rest system instead of our stress system. So we're just going to take a minute before we complete this exercise, and I encourage you all to just connect with how you're feeling right now. Is your heart rate high? Maybe reflect on the activity we've just done. Are your thoughts quite fast? Are they quite negative in nature? Just really take a moment to check in with yourself and see how you're thinking and feeling, both emotionally and physical sensations, because as we've been discussing, they are entirely linked. So what we're going to complete is something called the 4-7-8 breathing exercise, which I'm sure many of you might have heard of. And we're going to complete this activity twice. We're going to take a second in between just to restore and come back and complete it again. The reason we're completing this for a few minutes is because the more we do this, A, the more natural it becomes, and B, the more effect you will feel. So this is a really accessible activity as well, guys. If you are ever in a moment where you're feeling quite stressed or anything like that, then you've got an easy tool to access to bring you back down. But this is one of so many great breathwork techniques, and I will put some resources on a list at the end for you as well. So what we're going to do, we're going to sit in a comfortable position. We're going to breathe in through our nose for 4 seconds. We're going to hold our breath for 7 seconds, and then we're going to breathe out for 8 seconds. We're going to complete that for 2 minutes, and then we're going to have a break and do it again. And if it is difficult, don't worry, just bring yourself in on the next breath. As always, everything becomes more natural with practice. So we're going to start now, guys. If you find yourself in a comfortable position, and we're going to breathe in, 2, 3, 4, hold, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and out, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and in, hold, and out. In, hold, and out. And in, hold, and out. And in, hold, and out. I'm going to do it one last time. In, hold, and out. So I'll give you all a minute just to come back around and restore your breath a little bit to how you need it to come round. And then we're just going to complete it one more time so you feel the full effects of completing that full breathing exercise. Because the longer we complete this for, the more benefits we will feel ultimately. So we're going to go again in a few seconds, guys. Going to breathe in, 2, 3, 4, hold, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and out, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and in, hold, and out. And in, hold, and out. And in, hold, and out. In, hold, and out. And one last time. Breathe in, hold, and out. Okay, guys. So I want you to all kind of sit with this feeling for a moment, and since you checked in with how you felt before, just check in with yourself again, how your thoughts are feeling, how your body's feeling. How do you feel? Does your body feel different? Does your mind feel different? Bearing in mind this is just completing the exercise once, but it is quite a good access to start to feel those benefits, and there's so many different breathing exercises. Feel free to share these reflections now or at the end if anyone does have anything they would like to share, or any experiences they have with breath work, or if they feel any benefits from completing this activity. So now we're going to think about how does this work then? Why does breath work so well? So when we're relaxed, we tend to breathe slower, softer, more regularly, so less of an erratic pattern of breathing. And also we notice it's coming from the stomach and diaphragm, so a lot deeper within our lungs, the very bottom of our lungs, which allows for full oxygen exchange. So this is how we breathe when we are relaxed. So looking at what mechanisms are actually at play here, when we're breathing really slowly and softly like this, what we're doing is we're actually tricking our body and our mind. So even if we're in a stressful situation, we're sending a message to our mind and to our body that we're safe. That's the message it is receiving from this ultimately. So this activates something called our rest system, which is our parasympathetic nervous system. So the power of our breath is really amazing when we think about this, that through all of this, just through our breathing, we can go from perceiving the world in a really scary, threatening, dangerous way to actually feeling really in control of that situation. So that's one of the many benefits of breath work. Therefore, when we're in this rest mode, our perception of the world is entirely different because we're not seeing everything as a threat. We're not thinking from our threatful area of our brain. We're thinking from a really rational thinking part of our brain. We're able to think clearly, make logical decisions, think creatively, better relationships with others. All these logical thinking parts of the brain come from this prefrontal cortex, which is activated from using our breath, which is really powerful when we think about it. Not only this, when we're in our rest mode, more oxygen is actually sent to those same rational thinking areas of the brain. So if we're thinking of oxygen as, an essential thing for survival to go to these parts of the brain, it's really important that these rational parts of the brain are getting the same amount of oxygen. Those same areas of the brain involved in problem solving, logical thinking, impulse control, and perseverance as well. So all these benefits once again. Also, breathing slowly and deeply allows for a full oxygen exchange. So when we were talking earlier about that stress response and about having kind of unbalanced levels of oxygen and CO2 in our blood, when we're breathing effectively and efficiently, we're rebalancing that as well. So we're lessening the symptoms of anxiety because the molecules are in our blood the same way they should be. So we're rebalancing that. And this also lowers our heart rate, our blood pressure, once again stopping us reactivating that stress system and falling back into those cycles. So really important for this as well. Also, and some of you might have heard of this, it's quite a buzzword at the minute, but breathwork can actually boost something called neuroplasticity. So neuroplasticity is when the brain is rewired to function in an entirely different way. So a lot of us think of our brain as quite a fixed thing in some ways, when actually we can rewire it and the way it works and all these different areas of our brain, our neurons, our networks that are sending these really important messages about perception, we can actually rewire those entirely through breath work. So our brain is essentially, it's like a muscle. These different areas of the brain need to be exercised in order to access this tool easier. When we're focusing on our breath, and when we're doing that breathing exercise, then you're so focused on your breath, your brain's not going to other areas, it's not thinking about thoughts or what you're doing later on, it's bringing you back to the present. So the more you're exercising breath work and these activities, the more it's bringing you back to the present and the easier that skill is to access. So over time, it's almost like doing one mindfulness push-up. And every time you do a breathwork activity, it's giving you further skills to be able to access the present in future tenses as well, when you need to bring yourself back to the present moment. The more time we spend in this rest system, the actually easier it is to practice. So the less we'll perceive threat and the less likely we are to stay stuck in this stress system mode, and the more rested we are. So the final part we're going to speak about, and Luke's going to speak a little bit more about this after, is about thank you. So we can actually mould the brain through meditation as well. So meditation, firstly, it utilises our breath. So all those positives of breath work we were talking about, you get all those positives from completing meditation as well. So that's the first point. Secondly, there's many neuroscientific benefits of meditation. I'm just going to speak about a few today. But what's really impressive is meditation has been shown to reduce brain atrophy or brain shrinking, which can occur when we're anxious and depressed because we're not using those areas of the brain as much. So the neuroscientific benefits of meditation means that we can stop the shrinkage of areas of our brain, such as the hippocampus, which is involved in learning and memory, and also it stops those really important frontal lobes from shrinking, which are involved in decision making, logical thinking, all of that. So not only this, but actually meditation has been shown to grow those same areas of the brain. So we're not actually using the areas of our brain involved in fear and stress as much, but we're using those logical thinking parts of our brain, which is really important. And in line with this, it's been shown to decrease our amygdala as well, which is our fear response area of our brain, which activates the stress system. So once again, through meditation, really powerful tool that can rewire our brain entirely, enlarge the areas of the brain that we want to enlarge and we want to use more, and shrink the areas of the brain that might be more detrimental to our physical and mental health. In addition, meditation helps to gain a greater self-awareness of our thoughts. So we're able to listen into those thoughts, and not only that, but we're able to challenge them. This also rewires our brain because we're looking at our thoughts, we're creating new neural pathways, new ways of thinking, and new ways of perceiving the world. So it's really important for thought management and to listen to our thoughts. And it's also really important for connecting with our feelings. By feelings, I mean both emotional feelings and physical sensations as well. Meditation helps to impact mood hormones such as serotonin, increasing feel-good hormones, decreases stress hormones, releases anti-anxiety hormones and endorphins, and melatonin as well, our sleep hormone. So all these really important neuroscientific benefits just from meditation, basically. Thought management, mood regulation, and rewiring our brain, which is really, really important. So finally, the thing I will leave you with on this topic before Luke speaks a bit more about his experience with meditation: practice makes perfect, or rather, as we like to say, practice makes progress. None of this is about being perfect at it straight away. No one came, was born into the world and immediately had the skill of meditation. It's something that takes a lot of time and practice. Thinking about those brain push-ups we're doing each time we complete these exercises is making it easier and easier to access that rest mode and perceiving the world in a less dangerous and stressful way. So how many times have you heard, I can't meditate, my brain is too busy? Actually, for many of us, it's a skill to be developed. If you have a busy mind, it's even more of a reason to complete these activities. We recommend the best thing to do is implementing this as part of your daily routine, because you're more likely to complete these activities. And even better, doing it at the start of the day sets the tone for the day. So rather than checking your work emails at the start of the day or what uni lectures you've got for the day, start that day off activating your rest mode rather than your stress mode. And we have the power to do that through breathwork and meditation. And yeah, thank you. And there's some really good resources here, guys, for if you want to complete your own breath work or meditation. And I'll put this slide up at the end as well if anyone wants to take a picture or take it away with them. And yeah, any questions, I will answer them at the end. Luke, over to you.
Thanks, Tilly. Thanks. So this part of the talk is going to be kind of unashamedly spiritual, I have to say. So we've heard some of the benefits, physical benefits, mental benefits, and they are real. What I can say is that it's absolutely true. I've practiced meditation every day now for nearly 6 years, and I go further than saying it's improved my life to, in fact, it kind of saved my life, really. And I'll go into that a little bit because that's quite a dramatic statement. Going back away. So, yes, let's start with experience. So my experience before finding meditation, coming into meditation or Buddhist practice, I should say, was that I was a homeless IV Class A drug user. I was addicted to heroin, crack cocaine, crystal meth, and it really had taken me to the lowest that a human being can go in a lot of ways. I was completely divorced from my family, from my community, and from reality. I'd really lost track of what was real and what wasn't. And the point that I came to Buddhism, I was experiencing what I later found out is something that's spoken about a lot in Buddhism, and it's something that all human beings actually experience. I think that with people who find themselves in addiction, they just feel it more acutely. And I'm now able to reflect on the fact that actually this existed in me before I picked up drugs in order to deal with it. And this is something that's spoken about very frequently now. If you listen to the narrative around addiction these days, you'll hear trauma being spoken of a lot. And I didn't really have the language for that at the time. All I had was my own feeling of suffering, my own feeling of malady, of not feeling quite right in the world. As I say, this meant that I was I was homeless. I was completely bound up in the world of taking a substance in order to feel right in the world. So actually, I began that as a way of coping, as a way of feeling right in the world, really. Drugs were a solution to me to begin with. And you'll hear this time and time again with people that speak about their addiction and their recovery experiences, that actually drugs were the solution to the problem that was them to begin with. So I... sorry, that is my phone going off over there. Yeah, here's a little bit, just to say that this is backed up with mainly kind of qualitative data, to be honest with you, because obviously this is more the realm of experience rather than the quantitative. And, there's a lot of really good work on this qualitative stuff, this kind of existential stuff around suffering and how suffering is experienced in addiction. This is a really good paper, actually, to kind of look at some of this stuff, the philosophical ideas around suffering and what Buddhism kind of cottoned on to long before Western philosophers started to approach this subject, actually. Let's go back. So yes, it says here, Buddhism regards suffering as a spiritual phenomenon, an integral part of an individual's daily existence, samsara. That's the cycle of life and death. I won't go too much into that because it's quite far out. That has no beginning and no end. So this is the human condition that we're talking about here. And I think, the addict experiences this acutely because of the brutally cyclical nature of addiction, the getting of the drugs, the using, the cessation of suffering for a small amount of time, only to be reinforced with more suffering as the withdrawals kick in. It's like a microcosm of the human experience, in a way, felt every day. And this is called dukkha in not only in Buddhism, but Hinduism before that. This kind of Eastern tradition of looking at the human condition. And there will always be a nagging anxiety at the core of one's existence. Again, this is spoken about a lot when people come into recovery from addiction. They'll speak about this kind of spiritual malady, this feeling of not being quite right in the world, and therefore they found substances in order to make themselves feel right with this kind of human phenomenon. Dukkha is traditionally related to misery, a physical and mental pain, a change, potential suffering of future displeasure. So there's the idea that this is going on and on and on, and it won't end. And this is all quite dark, isn't it? I'm talking about quite dark stuff here, but there is a bright side. And yeah, this is kind of roughly relates to a deep existential dissatisfaction. So this is where this is very much the state that I was in when I arrived at a magical place called Wat Tam Krabak in the Saraburi region of Thailand. So this is a monastery that is in the thick of the Golden Triangle, so the historical trade routes of opium and heroin into the West, actually. So here's this magical monastery which sits around a whole industrial operation of heroin and opium, and it finds its way over to the West, where people use it on the street, where I was using it on the street before I arrived there. Now the monks there have for a long time dealt with kind of waifs and strays from the Western world who have kind of wandered into their monastery, often in a extreme state of suffering, of withdrawal. They might have been backpackers who had been involved in getting opium or heroin back over, and they had a habit themselves. And the monks very compassionately realized that they wanted to do something about, the suffering of these people. And there was quite a revolutionary monk who was a female monk. These are jungle monks, I might add. They're slightly different from the saffron-robed monks that you might associate with Buddhism. They're a kind of quite radical branch of monks that work for a start, which is strange for monks to do. They don't tend to have a working life. And also they tend to come from quite troubled backgrounds themselves. Anyway, so the female monk called Longpo Yai, she actually was a herbalist, and she developed a kind of herbal treatment, which is very extreme, and you can see there the jungle monk tending to someone in the bottom, it'll be in your bottom right hand corner. Now, I had to go through this process, so I arrived at Wat Tam Krabak in the throes of heroin withdrawal in a really bad way, and I didn't appreciate any of that beauty that I saw around me. I was just in a acutely suffering state, and then I went through a process of intense purging. So the monks give you this foul jungle potion concocted from strange plants in the jungle, and it literally just absolutely clears you out instantly. So what you have, the experience you have, is a very intense withdrawal from opiates, but it is quick. It is quick. And one thing about opiate withdrawal, for anyone who knows anything about it, is it can be long and it can be drawn out, and it feels like it's never going to end. This just packs it into 3 days, actually, of hell, of absolute hell. But you get through it quickly. And that was the process I went through. I've actually got some. So there's me there, looking younger. Having come through the other end of that detox, still looking a little bit green around the gills, I think. But yeah, that was me there. 2005, I went through that experience. I came through on the other end in a magical, wonderful monastery where there was a whole program of daily activity for me to get involved in. And it really was a spiritual experience. I'll give you an idea of daily life at Wat Tam Krabak. You get up in the morning at 4:30 in the morning, every morning, and sweep the monastery for an hour and a half in complete silence. Bear in mind that this monastery is in the jungle, and it is utterly futile brushing away leaves in a jungle, because it's a jungle and the leaves will return. But this is part of the Buddhist idea of, you can't, there's a continuation of everything, that everything is forever alive and changing, and as much as you sweep away, it will, life goes on, the cycles of life continue. After the sweeping, we were allowed to eat for 45 minutes of the day, and that was the only time that you could eat for 45 minutes. And the food was wonderful Thai food, which I haven't been able to recreate ever since. Like, I've tried to get the right ingredients, but I just can't make it as well as they did. And that's a very joyous time where you can talk with others around you. And then after that, we meditated for an hour and a half, and then we were working. It was a working monastery, so we engaged in working activities. I did various different things. I actually, with the other gentleman there, we built a boat together, which was then pushed out onto a lake on fire as part of a ceremony. And again, it's this, you learn this with monastic life, is that there is no permanence in anything, and they're trying to teach you this over and over again. And then we had chanting in the evening in a language that the Thai monks didn't even understand, in Pali, ancient Indian language. And the whole experience really did equate to a wonderful awakening of a different way of life for me, and something that would ultimately change my life and save my life, as I've said. And then when I returned to Birmingham afterwards, I really want to give a big shout out to the Birmingham Buddhist center, because a lot of the stuff that I learned while I was in Thailand was in a language I didn't quite understand, was in a context that was very culturally specific to Thai people. And I was very comfortable with that. But on my return to Birmingham, it was the Birmingham Buddhist Centre, and particularly the man in the photo there, Dharma Shalan, his name is. He's a wonderful man, and he helped me to make sense of Buddhism in the English language for a start, and how I would be able to practice Buddhism here in the UK, which seemed really daunting for me at the time, because I'd left a monastery and I was back in a country that wasn't a Buddhist country. How was I going to practice Buddhism? Where could I do it? Well, you can do it at the Birmingham Buddhist Centre, which is in Moseley, on Park Hill in Moseley. And they've had their doors open to people who are experiencing various different forms of suffering in much the same way they did at Wat Tangrabak. And they continue to do that. They have free meditation classes. They have going deeper classes where you can get more into Buddhism as well. And that's still running. If you want any details, I can help you with that. So a little bit about meditation. So we've heard some about the science, about the breath and what's going on in the brain. For me, the core practice that I have is mindfulness of breathing meditation, which is the classic kind of Buddhist meditation, really. And that is really as simple as being mindful of your breathing, focusing on your breathing. I've been doing that every single day now for, as I say, coming up to 6 years, and it has saved my life. It has meant that I'm no longer driven by unconscious elements within my psyche and within my experience. You know, I'm able to, through this practice, I found a place behind kind of self where I could observe what self does, and that saved my life, because while I was just living in the midst of that and being involved in it all the time, I just found myself in those cycles of doing the same thing and expecting different results time and time again. Through meditation and through practice, I have to say it is a bit like going to the gym. You just have to keep doing it. And it can be uncomfortable at times. I was able to have that liberating experience of not being caught in self and selfishness and self-centeredness all the time. And perhaps the most lovely one, undoubtedly, is Metta Bhavana. And this is more based on cultivation of love and kindness from the heart. So in a way, you can think of mindfulness of breathing as more of the mental stability, mental training, in a way. The Metta Bhavana is all about the heart. It's about cultivating loving kindness. Now, this is done by meditating in much the same way you would begin meditation in any other way, you know, sitting quietly and gently, checking in with the body. And then we bring to our consciousness ourselves to begin with. And that can be an uncomfortable thing, because we can be very unkind to ourselves, can't we? So if you're told to sit and bring yourself to mind, many different things could come up at different times. I'm really glad to say that for me nowadays, I'm happy with doing that, with bringing myself to mind. When I first came into this stuff, bringing myself to mind was a painful experience of shame, guilt, self-stigma, a lot of different horrors. And then we bring into mind someone that we're very, very close to, fond of, loved ones, our very close friends, a family member that's very dear to us. And this can often, you know, have the experience of making us kind of smile, really. You can watch people doing Metta Bhavana and you can watch the smile appear on their face that they're not even really conscious of. Then we bring to mind someone that we don't really know. It could be someone like the bus driver that you see every day when you get on the bus, or perhaps someone in a cafe here at the university who you've got no malice towards, but you don't know really anything about their life, and you see them every day. You might say hello, but you never really stop to think that they were born and one day they will die, and all of these kind of things. And then we bring to mind people who are difficult. Enemy is a strong word, but it's a very strong word, and hate is an even stronger word, but someone that we're having real difficulty with. And the idea is that we increase metta, love and kindness throughout the meditation, so that when we get to the point of the difficult person, we've cultivated enough to be able to bring that person into our consciousness without the same feelings of anger and resentment that we might have had going into it. And then we reach a kind of peak metta state where we start to expand that love out to all people within Birmingham, all people within the UK, all people within the world, and eventually all sentient beings within the universe, including animals. And it's a very beautiful thing, and can be felt very, it's a very emotional one, and people can be brought to tears by this kind of thing. It's very powerful. And then this vipassana is the kind of the deeper version of mindfulness of breathing, I would say, and that was something that I was talking about. So it starts with just concentration around breathing, and then there is some quite existential realizations that occur as a result of that. If you keep on practicing it, if you're so inclined. For some people, meditation is more about relaxation, and that's absolutely fine. It doesn't have to have the kind of meta-narrative of Buddhism behind it. It can still just be practiced as a really good thing to practice. So to talk about it very briefly, what the Buddha of this age kind of revealed was a middle path. So without going too far into it, he was a prince, Gautama, from a very affluent background, yet he had a feeling that things weren't quite right, and he went straight to asceticism, we call it, like really austere denying of the self, and from the kind of Vedic tradition of going out into the wilderness, having no food, having nothing. And he learned some stuff there, but it wasn't, there was still something missing for him. So the middle path is really that idea that we can't live in absolute indulgence, in absolute kind of hedonism. That is not, it's not a very fulfilling way to live. And likewise, completely denying yourself of everything, the clothes off your back, and turn away from your family, and just non-connected to anything, is also not the best way. So the middle path is the way of Buddhism in many ways, and there's some help that we have with that. So the Buddhism loves a kind of system of numbers. There's loads of them. There's the Eightfold Path. There's the 5 precepts. There's the 4 Noble Truths. I'm not going to go through all of them because there are so many. But here, this is hugely important in my recovery. So alongside the abstinence of not being caught up in that cyclical paradigm of picking up time and time again, I really needed a path to walk kind of ethically and in a well-being sense, because my life had been so taken over by just the consuming of drugs, and how I'd been pushed away to the kind of corners of society, and I didn't really have a very ethical framework or outlook or way of feeling good in this world. And Buddhism has some wonderful tools around this. So we have right view, being able to see what's true in situations. As I said before, I was divorced from reality, so being able to identify truth was very important to me. Right intention, being kind of more righteous in what I intend to get out of situations, not wanting it to just be self-centered outcomes. Right speech. I mean, you could talk about that for a long, long time. I think that dishonesty can go beyond just telling white lies to the point where being mindful of what happens with our speech is it was really, really important for me, because I suppose I'd gone to the extreme of this stuff to the point where I just lied constantly. So having some practice around right speech was very, very important to me. Right action, right livelihood, right effort, right concentration, and right mindfulness. These are all ways of maintaining, a good life, and I can contest that. That is the truth for my life. Again, we've got another handy number. Buddhists love doing this kind of thing. So we've got the three jewels, and the three jewels of Buddhism are Buddha, Sangha, and Dharma. So the Buddha, kind of obvious, but not so obvious in the sense that it's not just about worship of the Buddha. It's not about worship of the Buddha at all, because it's not a religious figure in that sense. But there is some idea of Buddhahood, a certain nature that we can attain. Sangha is community, so sometimes Buddhism can seem very individual based. Actually, it's not at all. Sangha is really, really important. I go to Sangha at the Buddhist Centre on a weekly basis, and this is a place where you join with other people in kind of joyous, harmonious community. Another thing that's been crucial to my recovery, outside of kind of Buddhism and more in 12-step fellowships, but without community, my recovery would be nothing. Without unity, without fellowship, without connecting to my fellow man and woman, it wouldn't stand for much. And Dharma is the way, the compassionate teachings of the Buddha, and it's it is the way of Buddhist life in a way. And then there's these other elements, so precepts, principles, Buddhist principles. We have contemplation and upaya, skillful means. So there's no sin in Buddhism. Nothing is particularly sinful, but we can be unskillful in our actions. It's a really lovely, kind way of putting it, I think. Whereas sometimes, shame is put on people for being sinful. The Buddhist would say that was an unskillful thing to do. It doesn't mean you're damned for eternity or anything like that. This stuff is backed up by research. It's not just me kind of being a hippy dippy talking about what worked for me. There's a lot of really good kind of qualitative, often phenomenological analysis of this stuff, and just looking at people's experiences, and they tell us certain things time and time again about how Buddhism has been really crucial in their recovery or their well-being. Some of the stuff that comes out, here we go. All experiences have got so much more value now. I value my experience more now. I use it all the time. So this idea that Buddhism is a kind of tool that we use in our life, that it helps us with all different areas of our life. And I'm in control of my destiny. So these are some of the themes that have come out of analysis of people who have really engaged with Buddhism. And there are specific recovery movements based around Buddhism. So this is a big thing in America. I don't think there's even one recovery Dharma meeting in the UK. And that's something I would like to find like-minded people to join me in starting eventually. But this is the idea of absolutely applying Buddhist life and principles and Dharma to recovery from addiction. Similar, I suppose, to the 12 steps, but in a specifically Buddhist way. You can, if you are interested in this kind of thing, there are online meetings, so there's Zoom meetings around the clock for things like Recovery Dharma that are run out of the US. Here is another lovely man called Dr. Lau, who is the Buddhist chaplain here at the University of Birmingham, and I've had the pleasure of having Dharma studies with Dr. Lau and meditated with him on many occasions. He helps us with our work at Better Than Well, addiction recovery stuff. And yeah, that's at the St. Francis Hall, the chaplaincy. If you don't know that, that's the kind of, it's the building up by the Guild, the chaplaincy at the university. And there is the Buddhist Meditation Society as well here at the University of Birmingham, run through the Guild, and they have very strong links to the Buddhist Centre in Moseley. And yeah, you can find them through the Guild website, and they have regular meditation Wednesdays from 4 to 5:30 at the chaplaincy at St. Francis Hall. So Better Than Well is a recovery program here at the University of Birmingham. As I've said before, it's a revolutionary thing that universities would actually acknowledge that there are people at the university, some like myself, that have come back to education after a period of being away from life completely and have taken up study later in life. But also there's an increasing number of young people who perhaps identify with that kind of suffering that I spoke about before, and that they are starting to use substances in such a way as to abate that suffering. So in addictions terms, from the addictions background that I come from, that's a very important distinction. Using substances or behaviours, I don't want to be moralistic about it and say it's always wrong. For the majority of us, we can, most people can take a drink and leave it alone and only use that on a social occasion. But there are a percentage of people, roughly 1 in 20 people, who will use substances or behaviours in a very different way from that. And they'll do it to push away uncomfortable experiences and change their mental state in a way that can really, really lead to trouble later in life. Thankfully, young people are able now to have that conversation or start to identify that and talk about it and have support if that's a way that they choose to see it. Practically, we have the drop-in at the North Gate Lodge, which is just kind of over there. I'm in there pretty much all the way through the day on Monday. People drop in. It's a social kind of atmosphere. If people want one-to-ones with me and they want to talk specific recovery-related stuff, I'm here to do that. I'm happy to do that. Tuesday looks like nothing happens. That's not true. I'm here. I'm always here. I'm someone who's around campus all the time, so people can check in with me on Tuesdays as well. Wednesdays, we kind of partner up with the Buddhist Meditation Society. There's the meditation that I spoke about. We have a monthly sober social, so we do sober activities. We kind of might be arts and culture related. We've done escape rooms. We go out for delicious food. We just do stuff that is kind of joyous, but doesn't involve drink, basically, or kind of drugs. It says research community share there. That's not true. It's a recovery community share. So after here, I'll be going over to that later on this evening. That's where people in recovery from outside of the university come to share their experiences of recovery. And then Friday, again, I'm at the lodge all day. And we have our kind of main meeting on Friday evenings, which is a recovery celebration meeting where we celebrate our recovery together as a student community. And yeah, that's just an end thought really on how this kind of mindfulness really does change lives, and it kind of encompasses my whole journey with Buddhism and freedom. To see our own mind clearly without being caught up in its movement, to watch thought without trying to do anything with or about it, simply seeing it and letting it go this is the way to freedom. And that's me. I'm done. We can take some questions on that, and I think there's probably some questions from Slido already. But is there anyone in the room who's got any questions or comments? If not, I'll just go straight to Slido questions. Okay, so there's some really good questions around practicalities of breath work here. So someone's written, it can be quite stressful in itself to try to control your breathing in a structured way. Can you change the number of seconds to suit your own pattern, and would it still have the same benefit? So does it have to be the ordered?
Yeah. So the goal here is... Oh, sorry. Hello? How do I switch? Is it switched on already? Okay. Is that okay? Okay, perfect. So I think the goal here ultimately is to be able to regulate your breathing better. So it's slowing it down, it's making it softer, more regular in pattern. As you say, it's not the case of necessarily always doing it in a structured way, but if you're taking your breath from, say, 25 breaths per minute to 20 breaths per minute, that's still a dramatic increase. So it's working with your own body and your own patterns, because obviously that's completely understandable that that's difficult to do. The other key here, and I know once again this is easier said than done, we don't want to just be doing breath work when we're already stressed, because it's going to be a lot harder to control our breathing. It's going to be doing it regularly as part of a routine when we're not stressed as well. So it's easier for us to access that tool, and the more we're in our rest system, the slower and more regular our breaths are going to be by default anyway. So that's kind of the goal there, just to slow it down as much as you can. Hopefully.
Yeah, thanks. And if breathing turns into panic, is there a way of turning this around? Kind of, I suppose, yeah, what do we do with our breathing when it's turned into panic?
Once again, that's why it's so important to access the tool regularly, because it is, once we're already in panic mode, it's going to be harder to bring ourselves out of that. So this is where connection with our body and our feelings is so important, because if we can recognise the early signs of anxiety before it turns into panic, it's obviously preferable to intervene then. So this is where meditation comes in as well. If we're able to identify, our heart rate's already increased slightly, and we're able to feel that at that point rather than a panic mode, it's going to have much more positive effects. So it's ideal to do it throughout, basically, not just when we're already in that panic mode.
Okay, so there's some questions that I guess I'll have a go answering. I spotted one. Yeah, so here we have, your experience at Wat Tam Krabak sounds amazing. What would you recommend to someone who does not have the means to travel to Thailand? It's a really good question. I can't say I had the means to travel there when I went there, I must say. By hook or by crook, I got there and just landed at the place. It is completely free. You don't have to pay for Wat Tam Krabak. It's they are monks, and it's a monastic kind of tradition of not handling money. So if you arrive at Wat Tam Krabak, they will take you in. But of course, some of us might not have the means or indeed the desire to get on a plane all the way to Thailand to do something about an addiction. So yeah, what I would say is that the best thing you can do if you are experiencing any of the kind of things that I've spoken about in terms of addiction, well, being at the University of Birmingham, the next best thing you can do is to come and talk to me, and then I can link you in with a community of people that are happy to talk about this. Now, if there is like a kind of an acute situation of dependence, let's say, where you need to come off a substance in a structured way, then I can also help point in the right direction with that, because it's really important that is done in a kind of, a medical way. Although I know that what Tam Krabak wasn't, it's not that I'm just advocating herbs in the jungle over the correct medical means for doing these things. And there's always lots of options with dependence and addiction, but the best thing to do is always to open up and talk to someone about it, and don't kind of push it down and let it get worse over time, like I did, to be honest with you. There was a lot of opportunities I could I should have taken earlier, but I think that in this day and age, there's less excuse not to do that. My experience with education was that I was kind of I was kicked out of it at the age of 14. I ended up in a kind of a criminal part of it, and that's how you were dealt with. Thankfully, that's not the case anymore, and people are here to look at people with addiction in a different way, other than them just being criminal delinquents. Right. So it's what led you to Buddhism in the first place? For me, what led me to Wat Tam Krabak in the first place was I went to a family funeral, and there was a family member at that funeral who I had a cousin who was also a heroin addict, and I asked after him, how's he doing? And my auntie said, he went away to this monastery in Thailand, and it was no one. These days, Wat Tam Krabak is a little well known. It's better known than it used to be, but it was complete mystery. And I've got to admit, it sounded kind of magical to me that I could go off to a jungle monastery in Thailand in order to do something about my heroin addiction. Sounded a lot better than just going down the methadone clinic and getting like 60 mils of methadone a day. So there was that attraction, the kind of Orientalism of it, if I'm honest, this Eastern solution to a Western problem. And so I wasn't really into Buddhism until I arrived at the monastery. And even when I arrived at the monastery, I wasn't sure what Buddhism was or meant. I just went there to get off heroin, first and foremost. But I was enchanted by everything about monastery life and the simplicity and the beauty of that was what led me to it. So really serendipitous, really, from my own experience. But I suppose I'd been interested in different ways of looking at the world prior to that. Otherwise, I wouldn't have probably thought that could be a solution. So open-mindedness is always really important around these things. Okay. How can I incorporate meditation when I can't find any quiet in my life in terms of the environment and my schedule? Yeah, this has got to be a big one for students, hasn't it? Because if you're living in halls and you're living with a quite tight schedule around your life and study, then it can feel like there isn't the time or there isn't the environment to be able to get yourself into a state of meditation. My own experience of this is that I started my journey with meditation in very stressful situations as well, with young children, and often in environments that weren't obviously conducive to meditation. But there is something in that practice, kind of against the odds, of just turning up for meditation and making it part of your daily life, that is almost a bit of a non-negotiable. I know this sounds a little regimented, but I can promise you that it pays off, that the practice pays off, that you don't always have to go to a chemical solution for what's going on inside of you. Just breaking that paradigm alone. So regular practice will mean now, I've got two small kids, 5 and 8, young boys that are really boisterous and restless, and they know that Daddy's meditating, and they know to give me the space to do that. But it doesn't mean they're any quieter, to be honest with you, and they'll continue to fight with each other during that time. it actually enhances my practice, because me going back into self, into dad, into the little buggers, they better not be doing this, is exactly what I'm kind of not getting involved in meditation. So it actually acts as a kind of tool, is a way that I would see it. Now, you need to be a little bit further along the line to have that kind of patience and practice. But eventually, actually living in a noisy environment and not getting in the middle of it is a real enhancer of meditation. And really, you should be able to kind of meditate anywhere, regardless of the situation. I mean, obviously there are examples of where you're in a conflict zone or something, but yeah, I would say try practicing where you're at in the situation you're at, and continue that kind of practice. Now, from a breathwork point of view, maybe, I don't know, Tilly, if there's what would you say around practicing breathwork? Can that be done in any environment?
Yeah, I think it would go in line with what you're saying. Like, even if you're not in control of that environment, it's the act of bringing yourself back to the present that's going to rewire your brain regardless. So even with breathwork, if there's a really busy environment around you, but you're able to bring that focus back to your breath in some way, then that's still going to have a lot of neuroscientific benefits, as long as, that takes practice, being able to bring your mind back to your breath. But yeah, it acts in line with that.
Okay, we've got time for more questions, haven't we? Yeah. Okay, how do I keep my mind from racing when trying to meditate? It's just jumped around, so I can't read. My mind gets cluttered with so many thoughts. Right, this is right to the core of Buddhism, really, of mindfulness, of breathing. A lot of the time people imagine that meditation is about shutting off thoughts and having some kind of serene plane of emptiness, whereby they've shut off their thoughts, and that's really all I need to do because I'm overwhelmed by these thoughts. I just need a break from them. I need them to stop. That isn't what meditation is about. You can't shut off your thoughts. You don't have control over them. If you and meditation will teach you this. If you observe them from a certain perspective and watch the way that they form and change, you'll notice that you're no part of that. You can't stop them. They will come. And the goal is not to get rid of them. The goal, for me, in my experience, is to find that seat, that place away from them where they are manifesting and occurring, but you're not in the thick of them and grabbing them like this and clutching at them. And it can be quite a humorous experience, I have to say. In the early days, you might chuckle, you might literally laugh at watching the mind do what the mind does, and the way that thoughts pop up. And that is a sign of real development, I think, in meditation, when you start to see the kind of whimsy and the nonsense of a lot of the thought process. So if your mind is busy when you go to meditate, welcome, you're in the right place. Tilly, anything about that?
I think, yeah, everything you were saying, but I think in part of that, just a reminder that all a thought is, which I think many of us don't even realise, is just a neural connection. It's something we have just formulated through our life experience. So I think once we can observe that, as you're saying, as just a thought, like that's all it is, it's just a connection in my brain, and not see it as part of us or fall into those thoughts, I think that's a really powerful tool. And it comes back to that idea of that mental push-up. Each time we're doing that activity and bringing ourselves back to the present despite having all of those thoughts, it means it's easier and easier to access, and then we're going to get less triggered by our thoughts, more aware of them, able to just observe them as they are and go. Also, the concept of curiosity, be curious about that thought, you know, am I feeling more stressed today? I don't tend to have this many thoughts. It tends to be a good indicator of where we're at that day, how we're feeling, things like this, what might have triggered us. So it's good to bring our awareness to that as well while we're meditating.
Here's a really good one. Breathing slowly is really relaxing but tends to make me feel tired. Is there a way to control our breathing but also keep our energy levels up? I know that there are different forms of breath work, aren't there?
Yeah. So there are loads of different types of breath work, and I think it's picking what works for you. As with anything, if it works for you, you're more likely to keep on doing it. There's loads of research coming about Wim Hof now and faster breathing and the feelings that evokes and how that can unlock feelings. So that might be worth something exploring if that's something you're interested in. It's really interesting. All the evidence coming out about that. I think, if you feel tired, I guess it's reflecting, is that bad tired? Are you feeling rested? Is there something you can do to energize yourself after? I think being in your rest system should still be energizing to a degree. So is that maybe something you want to complete before bed if it's making you feel tired? Is that going to make it easier to sleep? So I guess finding out what fits in with you and your routine would be beneficial. And playing around with breath work, trying different apps, different forms of breath work, fast, slow, timed, meditative practices instead, and just finding what works for you ultimately.
Thanks, Tilly. These jump around, so I'm trying to keep my eye on one. There was a So, do you have advice on how to tell when someone else or your own use of substance is becoming problematic? There are certain things, from my perspective, that you can look out for actually. One of them would be, and a really kind of good indicator would be, are you or the person you're concerned about, are they starting to use the substance on their own when it began as a social thing? These are the kind of things that I look out for, and I work with addiction outside of the university as well, and there are certain telltale things. Again, what I mentioned in the presentation around, and it's a difficult thing to work out, but you can ask someone some questions about how they use substances, not necessarily in an interrogative way, because that can be a bit of a heavy thing to do, but try and identify if someone is using substances to push away difficult feelings or parts of their life, or likewise behaviours as well. Are you using that behaviour? That could be gambling, it could be pornography, it could be even, to be honest with you, using your phone constantly because actually you're not comfortable being sat with yourself or your own experience. If you notice some of this stuff in yourself, it doesn't mean that you have to come and be signed up as an addict and join a program, but you can certainly talk to our community at Better Than Well about these things without any fear of judgment, without any fear of having to sign up to anything. But what I will say is, please do talk about it, because we usually have an idea, an intuitive idea of what's going on with our own experience, and unfortunately the kind of unconscious unrecognizing of that through behavior will just drive it further and further away from a place where you can do something about it. I'm trying to think of some other things to look for in terms of that moving over into problematic from recreational or experimentational. There's the obvious ones, changes in people's personality. There are things that you can spot if someone's becoming more paranoid, or some of their beliefs or the way that their interpersonal changes, if someone is more and more isolating away from other people, this can be a really good indicator that actually that relationship with their substance is prioritized, or behavior is becoming much stronger than their relationship with other people around them. As a student, I would think that I'd be surprised if you hadn't noticed some of this stuff in other people. And we really, really do hope that they find their way to a community of other people who can help them and support them with that stuff. I don't know if you've got any ideas on that.
I think in line with what Luke's saying, I think it's worth looking out for in yourself from a psychological perspective is, are you using this as an attempt to cope with something? So not just push things away, but, numb those feelings, to not think difficult thoughts, avoid certain triggers. Are there certain triggering people around you and you're having to use a substance or behaviour as an attempt to cope with this? So I think that's a really important one. I know since working in addiction myself and with people in recovery, I've started to challenge some of my own behaviours as well. It's not to say they're negative behaviours, but I used to find if I got home from work and I'd had a stressful day, I'd have like a glass of wine, and I realised in some sense I was using that to regulate my own emotions or to restore anxiety or bring myself back down in some way. So I think it's just, once again, looking inwards and being honest with yourself and being ready to have that discussion with yourself or someone else, whether that might be a signal of something else going on for you. So I think that's a really important one that I'd look out for.
Thanks, Tilly. I think the final one is definitely something that Tilly can answer. What other things could you recommend maintaining a healthy mindset?
Okay. So that's a very, very big topic. I think carrying on with that concept of the mind-body connection, there are so many tools we have intrinsically and different chemicals they're going to restore in us in some way. So breathwork and meditation, two really great mind-body tools to use. Exercise, really important one, and different forms of exercise we're going to gain different things from. If we're doing strength training, we're going to release endorphins, decrease cortisol and stress hormones, really positive things. Yoga, loads of research coming out about yoga now, releasing negative emotions and difficult emotions that we might store within our body. Talking is really, really important, being able to talk about things, having people in your life you can talk to, journaling, getting those thoughts out of your head and onto paper so we're not falling into those thought patterns that are re-triggering us. Hydration, are you eating well, are you sleeping well? All these really core fundamental things to our survival many of us aren't doing, and we're falling into these same kind of traps and feeling stuck and falling back into them. So yeah, just general lifestyle changes and using our mind and body.
Okay, that will bring us to the end of the questions. Thanks for having us to talk about this subject. It really does work, and it's something that's very close to my heart because I've seen some of these simple changes in mindset saving the lives of some of the most complicated people in society, for whom other areas of society really aren't sure what to do with. So this kind of way of looking at it has the potential for profound change in our communities, and I would encourage you to promote recovery as much as you can in your life. I'll leave it there. Thanks.
Thank you.